Me. Right, so I'd like to welcome everyone to today's event, which continues our Black History Year programme at the University of Westminster. As those of you who've joined us for previous events will know, the University of Westminster has specifically decided to go beyond the usual recognition of Black history during the single month of October, as most people do, by developing a programme that continues throughout this academic year and hopefully beyond. So the programme also forms part of the University of Westminster's response to its commitment to see equality, diversity and inclusion embedded throughout the university. So today it's our pleasure to host Rhoda Quist, who will be talking to us on confronting our imposter. Now, I know I've definitely got an imposter that needs confronting, so it'll be really interesting to hear what Rhoda has to say about that. So a little bit about Rhoda. She's a wellness STEM, so that's the sciences, technology, engineering, maths, and some people include other bits within STEM. But she's a STEM advocate and a freelance speaker who is keen to support individuals develop their confidence and identity by managing stressful life experiences. And we all have those from time to time. So Rhoda graduated with a BSc in biochemistry from the University of Essex in 2016 and obtained an MSc in psychology in 2018. Since then, Rhoda has founded a mental health social enterprise called Rose Lab, which supports young people to look after their physical and mental well-being through events and workshops. Now, Rhoda has been inspiring young people since 2016, and she encourages them to explore STEM careers and supports their professional and personal development. Rhoda will be shedding light for us today on imposter phenomenon, and she'll explain a little bit more about what that actually is as part of her talk and how it affects individuals, especially those from BME backgrounds, I'd say BAME backgrounds. Rhoda will discuss her own personal experiences and her journey with still confronting her imposter and how she has been successful in tackling these feelings by confronting them head on in the workplace. Very quickly about me, my name's Deborah Husbands. I'm a chartered psychologist and senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Westminster. I co-chair the BME network and lead the Black History Year steering group, and also co-lead the Human Library Project at Westminster. I sit on the British Psychological Society's Presidential Task Force for Diversity and Inclusion, and I'm interested in racialized experiences and use my research to explore how these experiences affect the development of a sense of belonging in marginalized and underrepresented groups, including that of the imposter phenomenon. So the format for this afternoon's event is that we'll first hear from Rhoda for about 30 minutes. I'll then ask a few questions, followed by a Q&A opportunity where your questions, your comments can be posed in the chat to Rhoda, and I'll post them on your behalf. So the chat will be moderated by the Black History Year steering group. So please feel free to become involved in this discussion, posting your comments and questions as we proceed. So over to you, Rhoda, for your experience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deborah, for that amazing introduction. Again, hi everyone. Really, really nice to be here and very excited to join the Black History Year series at University of Westminster. It's amazing to see universities actively championing, I must say, diversity and inclusion. So as Dr. Deborah said, I will be talking about confronting my imposter. I will be sharing my screen shortly, but please do think of questions that you could ask me possibly at the end. Hopefully you can see my screen shortly. Great, okay. Hopefully you can see my screen, so I'll continue on. So as Dr. Deborah said, my talk today is about confronting my imposter. So I'm Rhoda Jeanette Quist. I thought it would be good to give you a quick introduction about me. So I'm 26 years young. I'm born and bred in London, but my parents are of Ghanaian heritage. As Dr. Deborah said, I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Rose Lab, which essentially helps young people to develop confidence and their identity. So essentially it forms links between the biochemical changes in your body and then your behavior. So for example, when you're stressed, enabling young people to understand what happens internally and how this affects our skin and our behavior, etc. I'm also a freelance speaker, and this is the first time I'll be actively talking about my experiences of imposter, so I'm really excited to do that. And I'm also a UX research consultant, so I started a new job in technology last week, so that's very exciting. It's still in the same line of work of STEM. So I thought it would be good to give you a snapshot of the aims of today. So what essentially I want attendees to take home from my talk. So essentially I want to share my experiences of confronting my imposter. Hopefully the attendees can take something from today. So hopefully you can take something, even if it's one little thing. And I think with my experiences and the hindsight I've now got, I think I'll be doing a disservice if I don't share my experiences. And how I've successfully overcome and still am overcoming them. Also, it's to educate. So whether you are aware or not aware, individuals from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds are more likely to experience these feelings for a range of reasons. And I think it's important we begin to really think about how we can create a safe environment for these individuals, for them to thrive and not just survive. I think that's really, really key. So again, you may or may not be aware that the feelings of imposter can be in your natural temperament. However, for people of colour, the media and society does actually fuel these feelings. So it's not just the voice in our heads that's telling us we're not good enough. Society actually tells us that we're not good enough. So whether you are a parent, an employer, etc., hopefully you can take something from today. So, as I mentioned, imposter syndrome will be the main thing I'll be discussing. It's just to mention that a lot of people also call it imposter phenomenon, simply because the word syndrome refers to it as being a condition, which is not. But for the sake of this talk, I may refer to it as imposter syndrome, but I thought it would be important for me to highlight that. So as I was sort of going through my experiences, I knew the feeling of imposter, but I didn't actually know there was actually a term for this until I started doing research, speaking to a range of people. And then I found out it was actually coined by two psychologists. So Pauline and Suzanne in 1978 actually discovered imposter syndrome. Initially, they thought that it just affected women. However, a lot of research points to the idea that it affects both sexes, both male and female. So essentially, what is imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, you may ask? And it's simply the feeling, so it's an internal experience where you feel as if you're not good enough and that all your achievements are gained by sheer luck and not by your qualifications or your natural talents. So essentially you feel like a fraud. So you feel like you'll be found out and everything that you worked so hard for doesn't actually belong to you, essentially. So just to simplify that definition, so it's the feeling that you do not belong here, and here can mean a variety of things. So it could mean you don't belong in the classroom, you don't belong in the workplace, you don't belong in the friendship group. Whatever here means to you, it's just that feeling of feeling like an outsider, essentially. And as I did emphasize, it does affect both men and women, but a lot of research points to the idea that women are significantly more affected by imposter syndrome. I thought it would be good to also give you a snapshot of my journey so far, just to put everything into context for you, and also for you to potentially start seeing where my feelings of imposter may have begun to develop. But I will talk you through that as we go along. So I started my degree in 2013 at the University of Essex. It was an amazing university. I actually attended University of Essex through clearing. So that wasn't my first choice of university. However, I was very, very happy that I did attend that university. So whilst I was at university, I had a range of roles, so both internal roles and external. So I worked in JD Sports as a sales assistant. I also had a role as a faculty convener of science and health. So within the science and health department, where I sort of liaised with the vice president to find out ways we can better serve the science departments. And then fast track graduated in 2016, which was great. And then I thought, okay, I need to actually get a job. But whilst I was at university, I thought I've worked so hard, a job should almost fall on my lap as I apply. And the harsh reality is that it just didn't work like that. So between 2016 and 2017, as you can see from the slideshow, I was job hunting, applying to loads of roles, studying a biochemistry degree was fairly broad. So for those that know, biochemistry essentially the mixture of both biology degree and a chemistry degree, essentially. So it kind of broadened my horizons into what industry I could go into. But at that point in time in 2016, I only knew of lab roles, which I did not necessarily want, however, still applied to anyway. And then I thought, do you know what, I'm going to pause. And I worked in House of Fraser as a brand specialist for Michael Kors, which was fantastic. And then I also thought, okay, let me travel. I went to Ibiza and thought, do you know what? I'm really passionate about psychology, which was the first degree I initially wanted to study. So I then decided to go back to university and study. So I did a conversion master's in 2017. And 2017, I think, was the most pivotal part of my career to date. So I call it my self-discovery year, because at that point in time, I realized that I do want to go back and do psychology. I do want a role that uses disciplines of psychology. And I was still pondering whether I wanted to become a clinical psychologist or go into occupational psychology. But again, I thought, I don't know many Black women who are clinical psychologists or occupational psychologists. So I sort of, put those career options on the back burner. But I developed my social enterprise Rose Lab. So that's where the idea came to me when I was extremely stressed at university. So I was thinking, I've now mastered, what can I study? What can I go into with my degree? Is a job going to fall on my lap this time? And then I realized my skin was extremely affected due to stress, because that was the only change in my lifestyle. And I thought not many people are aware of how the chemical imbalances in your body could actually lead to skincare issues, for example. So essentially that's the ideas that underpin Rose Lab, but essentially we deliver mental health workshops. So then after I graduated, I became a tutor. So actually, while studying, I was tutoring. So A-level chemistry and biology, which was great. Earning a bit of cash while studying is always great. And then I interned at a mental health charity in London. So I lived on campus. So the university is in Colchester. And then I traveled back to London 2 days a week while studying. And there were times where I had to miss lectures for my full-time job, which isn't great, but that's just how it had to go at that point in time. And then I graduated and then so as I graduated, I was looking for roles. I decided to volunteer at St. Anne's Mental Health Hospital as a HR medical assistant, which was great. And I got to work closely with people that sort of work in the occupational psychology department. I also became an honorary assistant psychologist where I was helping doctors understand their refugee patients. But then I realized I don't want to go into clinical psychology. And then, started volunteering there. Became a psychology academic mentor for chemistry and psychology for school in Tower Hamlets, which was fantastic. Very passionate about giving back to the community, supporting people that look like me who are thinking, what can I do with a science degree or just career options in general? And then after that, I thought, okay, don't want to work in the classroom, but I still want to work with young people. So I had a role, which was almost my first corporate role in 2019, based in a nice office and bank. And then I worked as a project coordinator. So essentially, I worked with clients such as Morgan Stanley, Public Health England, to organise exciting projects for young people to be inspired into STEM. Yeah, so I learned a lot in that role. And then in 2020, I thought, okay, this doesn't challenge me anymore. I sort of want to use my technical expertise I've developed from biochemistry and move out of an outreach role, because the project coordinator role is mainly outreach, which is a great role, and it helped me understand the range of roles that are around. So yeah, learned to code, did a Python course by Sparta Global, which is a fantastic company. If you are looking to move into technology and maybe go on a course, this course was free. Sparta Global have a fantastic D&I program that you can go on. So I went on the course for 6 to 8 weeks, which I was doing after work. You receive a mentor and they help you sort of build your coding experience, whether it's Python or Java. So that was fantastic. And I thought this would really help me move into technology, which was an area I really wanted to go into. And then, yeah, so now I'm a UX research consultant. So on the way, I've picked up multiple projects. So that is literally a run through of my experience. And as I was going through all my experience, there were many areas where I actually felt the feelings of imposter. But as I mentioned, I wasn't aware it was called imposter phenomenon. So I thought it would be good to give you a visual snapshot of what imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon looks like. So the grey circle, what I think others know. So you think others know way more than you in comparison to what you think you know. And then you can see the comparison with reality, that what you know and what others know all intersect. So you know a little bit of what everyone knows, and that forms the bigger picture of you. So essentially, imposter syndrome is almost like the skewed perception of self versus reality. And then as I was researching more into imposter syndrome, I started to sort of understand the fact that many people who are high achievers actually have these feelings, which was almost comforting for me, because I see myself as a high achiever, someone who's very ambitious, and I just couldn't understand what these feelings were. It just didn't make sense at that point in time. Again, now I'm speaking from hindsight, but as you can imagine, coming out of university, where jobs are not falling on your lap, you are having those feelings where you're second guessing yourself. You studied, you've graduated, I've got a master's at this point, what is actually going on? And then as I started doing research, imposter phenomenon is actually the secret fears of high achievers. So a lot of people who are successful, high achieving, experience this. So for me, as I mentioned, it was very comforting that people at different parts of their career, different levels, whether it was entry through to senior positions, women that have PhDs, etc., have in some point in their life or are possibly still battling these feelings. So I thought it would be great to give you a snapshot of some of the influential women that I look up to who have actually been open about the fact that they suffer from imposter syndrome. And as you can see from their credentials, high achieving, successful women, however, imposter syndrome still affected them. So then I thought it's important that I recognize where these feelings stem from. And this is when I started reflecting on my journey, mainly when I was in the phase of self-discovery. So around 2017, as I mentioned, the workplace sort of reflection happened almost last year when I left my role. I left my role recently, actually, but when I got into my role 2 years ago, but I started really reflecting last year. So as I mentioned, my parents are from Ghanaian heritage. So I am from an African culture. So I started looking into imposter syndrome, etc. And I saw a lot of sort of research that pointed to the idea that people from certain cultures may be more prone to feeling these feelings of imposter. And this could be perhaps because sometimes women are always told not to be too loud, and sometimes to dim their light for whatever that reason could be. So I thought, okay, this could be a reason potentially. But I'm very grateful that my family, my parents never ever dimmed my light. They always told me to be this confident woman. They always believed in what I wanted to do and fully supported me and never second guessed me, which was really, really helpful, I believe. But I thought it's important to point out that sometimes, depending on the culture that you're from, these feelings can be fueled. And then, as I mentioned, on my reflective journey, I realized that when I started to first feel these feelings was when I was in school, where I was one of a few Black students who took triple science at GCSE, who did A-level biology and chemistry. Luckily for me, my chemistry teacher was Black. She was a Black woman who actually had a PhD in chemistry. And when I reflected, I thought this could actually be why I went into studying biochemistry. And I really began to understand the importance of representation, because you can't be what you can't see. You can't aspire to be in a certain role if you don't see people like you in those roles. And I definitely experienced that in my career journey and my career choices. And then graduation, I thought, okay, as I mentioned, that's where some of the feelings of imposter developed. And then my most recent experience is in the workplace. In my last role, being a minority in the office, so I was one of 2 Black people in the office. And I experienced a lot of microaggressions, if I'm honest, which I will go into in the next slides just to sort of give people an overview of what this looks like. And I'm aware for Black and minority ethnics, they can probably resonate with me, but for people that aren't from a BME heritage, I think it's important that you actually see what these microaggressions can look like. So again, all my experiences at different points of my career all made me question, do I belong here? Am I good enough? So I thought, no holding back in this talk. Let me give you a real picture of what the microaggressions look like. So I won't read out all the microaggressions, but these were some of the things I was called, that was said to me in my last role, essentially. But also aside from my last role, just in general. So people have been surprised that I studied a bachelor's in biochemistry, surprised I have a master's in psychology, tell me I speak very well, have questioned my name, where's it from, etc. I've been called sassy. I've been treated differently to my non-Black colleagues. In meetings, I think this is the one where I felt a lot of people that I've spoken to from my Black friends essentially have felt that, where you're in meetings and you just feel invisible. So yeah, it's horrible. I thought I'd give you a quick snapshot. And this was me summarizing them and not even going into full detail. So it's just to highlight to you that some of these encounters fueled imposter syndrome. So at the time, I wasn't even aware that some of these comments were offensive. Again, speaking from hindsight and being quite reflective, it's only now I can think about how this has affected me as an individual and definitely fueled imposter syndrome. So again, this points to the idea that it's not just a feeling that Black people feel, and sometimes it's systemic racism that actually does exist, whether we like to believe it or not. So then I thought about how have I began to overcome imposter syndrome? Like, what have I actively done? And this was an amazing exercise to be quite self-reflective in that sense. And hopefully you can take away at least one thing from this slide anyway. So in terms of for myself, as the definition mentions, imposter syndrome is the feeling of being quite inadequate. And I thought, okay, if this is a feeling's not a fact. So I went through an exercise where I was differentiating feelings from facts. So I was writing down how I was feeling and writing down facts. So for example, at GCSE, I received 11 A stars. So I received 7 A stars, 3 A's and 1 B. And I've got a master's in psychology. So things that are facts about yourself. I went through that exercise of really pulling them out. And then I thought, okay, I know what my strengths are. So whether you want to do this exercise in a different color, I began nurturing what those strengths were and developing areas that need improvement. So, for example, prior to my last role, public speaking was something that I felt like I wasn't good at. So I started developing that. And I think this, as a Black and minority, someone from a Black and minority ethnic background, is extremely important, because I think when the world is telling you that you do not belong, you need to be able to tell yourself that I actually do, because no one else will tell you. So I think that is something that was really crucial to my self-development. And therapy and getting a mentor. I think when I was going through extreme feelings of imposter syndrome last year, I reached out to a therapist, which was great. We sort of agreed on a fee and then how often I wanted to meet with the therapist. I did decide to go for a Black woman because I felt like someone I identify with and can relate to me was extremely important at that time. Similarly, I got a mentor as well. He wasn't my therapist, but that was extremely important for me as well, to speak to someone about my career goals, aspirations, and sometimes issues in the workplace as well. And my mentor was actually a white woman, which was lovely as well, to have differing opinions, but also having a therapist that was Black side by side. I think I personally worked really well for me. And then researching into imposter syndrome. So again, before you actually know what it's called, you can't necessarily do the research, but hopefully if so far everything that I've said resonates with you, yeah, you can now research into it. And there's a great book that helped me, which is called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women by Valerie Young, who's an international speaker, and her book is award-winning. And that's a great book to find out about imposter syndrome, especially as a woman. And then building your personal and professional networks. There's a lot of research that points to the idea that Black and minority ethnic background individuals are more likely to build their personal and professional networks than their white counterparts. And I think this is extremely important, especially navigating the workplace, being able to speak to someone about your experience, be consolidated. And yeah, your network is your net worth. I think I've definitely got a good network for different areas of my life. Even for my move into technology, it wasn't an easy move, but definitely my network has helped me to get into UX research, which was great. And then in the workplace, I think it's important that you know your rights. So read your contract, definitely. So before you sign your contract, when your contract is signed, if there's something that you don't quite understand, definitely reach out to someone outside of the workplace or even the HR within your workplace. I think that's so important, especially as a Black and minority. It's important that we know our rights, and sometimes, yeah, people are not aware that we do know our rights. And I think document everything. So this was something I started quite late into my journey, but when I started experiencing some of the microaggressions, I started to think, am I just hypersensitive to what's going on? And you do have those times where you question yourself. So then I started to document the times when things would happen, what the actual incident was. And I think this was a great way for me to actually tell myself that I'm not being hypersensitive. What is going on is actually ridiculous. And I think it's a great way if you are thinking of kickstarting a formal process. Yeah, so document everything. I wish someone mentioned that to me prior to being in the workplace as well. And I think when you are speaking to people about your experiences, being able to pull upon dates, times, and specific situations does give you power. Find people you can trust, whether it's in the workplace or outside of the workplace. I think it's important that you find people you can outlet to. For me, this point was really important. Go into meetings prepared. So I am someone that likes to over-prepare. I do think that is a symptom of imposter, but it definitely does help me and has helped me get out of a lot of situations. So go into meetings prepared with any issues that you that are pondering on your mind. For example, if you have an agenda with your manager already, go into the meeting perhaps already partially preparing. Again, this could be imposter, but from my experiences, this does work for me. Yeah, and people have been surprised that I have come to meetings prepared. Anyway, sign up to Unison. So this was something I did a few months ago. So I didn't know about Unison until one of my friends spoke to me about Unison. But essentially, you can get legal career and financial advice. They do charge a small fee, and they do it according to how much you're currently being paid. But that's great, because when you want to kickstart a process potentially in the workplace, you do have external representative, which is extremely important as well. So then I thought, okay, I've spoken about my experiences in the workplace as a Black woman. Is it just my personal experiences, or is there systemic racism that actually exists that echoes my experiences? And then I started to dig for a few articles, etc. And then I found this article by Business in the Community, BITC, which was a report done in 2020. So as you can see, the stats are shocking. Am I surprised? No. But yeah, for Black employees to only hold 1.5% of management and leadership positions, for me, honestly, is terrible. And again, is the reason why imposter syndrome in Black and minority ethnic people is fueled, essentially, because not having people at a senior level that look like you can actually make change to the culture of an organization is detrimental. Again, this article spoke about there's been a slight increase from 2014 when 1.4% of managers were Black employees. So I think I don't think I included this article in one of the sources that I sort of included in my talk, but yes, please do your research and you can see the shocking stats for yourself. And then I thought, okay, how does the media constitute to feelings of imposter in Black and minority ethnic individuals? And time again, we see how the media reinforces systemic racism. When I am speaking to my friends of BME backgrounds, we see it plain and clear compared to my non-BME friends, etc. But I think taking this snapshot and putting this slide together, I really could talk about each and every experience from these images, and maybe it connects or resonates with you. But yeah, we see how the system is failing Black and minority ethnic people constantly, especially with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, which kickstarted the Black Lives Matter protests. We saw a lot of organizations, some of them writing statements, some of them not, some of them saying they're going to provide better support for Black and minority people a year on, and little to no change has essentially happened. I think I read an article where there's been petitions for the ethnicity pay gap to be published. As you may be aware, the gender pay gap was published in, so I think it's mandatory now for organizations, depending on their size, to sort of publicize their gender pay gap. So this was launched in 2016, and there's still petitions for this to be the same for ethnicity pay gap. But when that does happen, and I'm hopeful it will happen, we'll definitely start to see the disparities between races and salary. And then I thought it's important to give you take-home messages. It's not all doom and gloom. There is a way you can make a difference. And I think starting by checking your privilege is extremely important. For example, in my case, my parents were very supportive in what I wanted to go into. I was aware of science, STEM roles that I could go into, but I'm aware that, for example, for people like myself, this isn't always the case. And that's why I really want to drive that support through workshops and building self-identity within my brand, Rose Lab. So as a Black woman myself, I've also checked my privilege on that level. So I think there is a way that everyone can check their privilege, and some people are more privileged than others. And I think it's important that, you check that. And I think actively listen and champion Black voices. It's so important that allies speak up and actually try and make a difference, and not just say they're going to do something, but be accountable for the changes and be transparent with where their company is in regards to ethnicity and salary, etc. But more importantly, it's important that senior leaders who can actually drive the change hire and sponsor Black talent in the workplace. That is where we need to see the diversity and inclusion, because I think we're moving away from the idea that diversity is having that token Black girl in the office, ticking that box. Yep, diversity is done. But when you think about inclusion, it's programs like, for example, the Black History Year series, where they've made sure that they've embedded it throughout the whole year, apart from October. So I think, how are you making sure you're actually including less advantaged people? And I think it's important that employers set targets to increase representation of Black people and BME people at senior level positions, but in all positions. I mean, I speak to my friends and they're so used to being the only Black person in the office, the only minority, etc., etc. So what are you doing to actively drive change? And I think there's loads of reports that have been published, especially since the start of COVID. Black and minority ethnic people have been extremely affected in terms of jobs, have expressed extreme job dissatisfaction in regards to pay as well. They've expressed, we've seen a massive disparity between how much Black individuals, Black and minority individuals are being paid compared to their white counterparts. And I think this Race at Work report really highlights that well. So yeah, you can read that, which is by Business in the Community. They also have a Race at Work survey, which I will be completing shortly, but essentially it's highlighting your experiences in the workplace. And yeah, it closes on the 30th of June. So I think it's important that you do fill this in if possible. And again, as you can see from my discussion, I think what has really supported me is being quite self-reflective. And this wasn't something that necessarily came naturally. It was something that I've actively tried to develop and has really supported me in my journey. So from moving into technology, from combating feelings of imposter, from knowing my worth and adding tax as well, I think it's so important that young people develop emotional intelligence. And according to the World Economic Forum, emotional intelligence is now one of the top 10 traits that organizations look for when they're recruiting, especially when we're moving into an AI-dominated industry. The one thing that AI and robots can't replace is emotional intelligence. So this was something that has helped me as a Black and a Black minority. So my workshops essentially help individuals develop their identity, know their worth, build their confidence, etc. But yeah, I think that's it for me today. I hope you've learned something. Please do feel free to get in contact with me, whether it's about a workshop, whether you are an employer and you want to find out how you can do better. Please do get in touch. And I think it's important that I didn't mention in my slides, I've been able to make a 10K plus pay jump into my new role, which wasn't easy, but yeah, great negotiation skills. And I think that's also important, being a Black and minority ethnic background, because other people do it so well. We should be able to do it as well. Feel free to connect with me as well. And yeah, please remember, you do belong in that room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. That's a really interesting talk, and lots of powerful points, I think, to take away personally, I think for myself as well. If you unshare your screen, then we can get into a little bit of a discussion here on the points that you've raised. So One of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to you is the importance of heritage and how, in your particular case, that seemed to play out into the ways in which you confronted obstacles and, you know, dealt with the conception of yourself. And I was wondering whether, you know, the imposter phenomenon is something that we're more likely to see a product of in Western societies, where there's perhaps increased levels of surveillance and competitiveness than, say, in other cultures, say in the African diaspora. I don't know what your views are about that. And you don't necessarily need to answer that now, but it was just something that was sort of floating around in my head. But while you're thinking about that, I was also thinking about how the imposter phenomenon is so closely related to a sense of belonging, you know, that feeling, like you said, you know, you belong in the room, you belong in the boardroom, you have a seat at the table, it's yours, you have a voice, you can use it. And the importance of going through that reflective exercise that you did, so listing your facts, the things that are known about yourself and knowing your strengths and leveraging, I don't call them weaknesses, but leveraging your opportunities, so important. And of course, the role of therapy in your own life. There are two questions I want to ask you, then I want to kind of segue into the questions that have been raised in the chat. So the first one really is, given that you're in this university space giving this talk, and of course, I think when you were talking about your experience and university being a place where perhaps the notion of an imposter reared its head, what can universities do to help staff and students for whom things like, you know, sort of being on performance and being, you know, out there in the public eye, if you like, can be an overwhelming, if not just a crippling experience. How can you manage or confront or tame your imposter in the university environment?
That's a great question. I think in the university environment, definitely we need to see more representation. I don't think I had one Black lecturer. So Dr. Deborah, it's amazing to see you, because I don't think in my whole entire university experience, so the 3 years at undergrad and then the year of my master's, that I had a Black lecturer or even saw one. So again, like I said, you can't be what you can't see. And I think unconsciously, as a Black person, you don't realize how much representation actually affects you. Even though it's nice to see that familiar face, someone you can relate to, actually knowing how it affects the decisions you make in your later life is important. As I mentioned, I had a chemistry teacher. My A-level chemistry teacher was a Black woman. And again, I didn't know, I knew I wanted to have a science degree, but I didn't want to study medicine. So I studied biochemistry, and I literally only knew of biochemistry after speaking to her, because the only other thing I knew was about biomedicine. But my strengths were chemistry. So that came from a conversation with her. And if she wasn't a Black woman who really felt like she could relate to me, would I have studied that degree and been where I am? I don't think so. So I think, again, increasing representation. I think also trying to understand the experiences of Black and minority ethnic people. So while studying, as you saw from my career journey, I had to have multiple roles for different reasons to ensure that I can enjoy university, have money in my pocket, and also study at the same time. So balancing all of that was definitely something, as a BME person, that I had no choice. I literally just had to do it. So I think, I'm not sure if that's similar for other people like myself, but from my journey, I always studied I always had a job whilst I was studying. So I think universities need to really understand the experience of BME people and compare that to non-BME people, and start to really bring out the differences and similarities, and where there are differences, what actions are you actually going to put into place to make sure that they are supported throughout their whole journey, and beyond as well. I think beyond is extremely important as well. So when I interned at Sane Mental Health Charity, I actually found this internship through my university. which was great. And that really helped me to get my foot in the door because I was being paid as well. I have a really good relationship with them now. One girl that I know that also interned with them, she's from BME Heritage as well. When she got made redundant, she went back to them and they actually gave her a job. So I think it's definitely about seeing how you can support BME people whilst at university and beyond. And I think in terms of BME staff, speaking to them and learning from their experiences, it must be so hard being a BME lecturer and battling imposter syndrome, definitely, because from the research, it's fueled, it's seen in academic institutions greatly. And I saw research that points to the idea that because in university or when you're doing research, credible research is all about punching holes into theories, that actually fuels imposter syndrome. So I think really speaking to your BME staff and finding out their experiences. And I work in user experience. So to me, this is common sense. But again, I'm here to share my experiences and hopefully there can be a difference. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it actually highlights something that's been coming up quite a lot in the chat while you've been presenting. A lot of people are saying, and we're staying with the university environment for just a minute, that many Black women scholars tend not to support others, as in students, postgraduate students, at whatever level they are. They don't bother to respond to emails, they don't respond to messages, and it's clear that we have to do better to support each other. So how can we kind of change that for, say, Black female academics that themselves are struggling with imposter phenomenon? And I'm saying this is not necessarily a question for which you have an answer, but it's certainly something that's resonating on the radar with people who are listening to this talk. So I've got to kind of, I hold my hand up here as being one of those Black academics who hopefully is not fitting into that bracket. So this whole issue of the imposter phenomenon seems to sit within the construction of identity. And I'm going to kind of link two questions here around that. So one attendee has asked, does the number of responsibilities, so the multiple hats that people wear, or say, let's call it intersectionality, for want of a better word. So all of this, does that increase the feelings of being an imposter because a person is spread so thinly? So for example, they're simultaneously managing the roles of being wife, mother, scholar, entrepreneur, sister, daughter, aunt, whatever things they are, in addition to dealing with the daily experience of racism. So how does that kind of feed into the development of feeling that one is an imposter? And then there was another question that I want to kind of link that to, in terms of having a bisexual identity. So again, from an intersectionality perspective, there's lots of characteristics in there. A person who is bisexual with the imposter syndrome may have particular struggles, more so because monosexism is the order of the day. So have you come across issues for people who are bisexual and experiencing imposter the syndrome or phenomenon, and how much more difficult that might be for them? So it's a bit of a complex question, but it's really all centered around multiple identities.
Some really good questions. I think in regards to the first question, the intersectionality, definitely, the different layers fuels imposter syndrome, definitely. So for me, being Black and then being a woman in itself, there's those daily struggles and then they meet in the middle sometimes. And I think being a woman, you start to, for me anyway, I'm in my mid-20s, you're thinking about your biological clock. And then I'm also thinking about my career. So where I want to be at the point in my career. And then you start to think, okay, am I being maternal enough? Am I being woman enough if I'm putting my career first? So yeah, you're definitely battling all those different intersections. So I'm not a wife, but I can imagine having those extra pressures of being a wife, being a mother, etc. working as well, you definitely are battling multiple feelings of imposter. But again, I think it's creating your own reality. So again, differentiating feelings from facts is so important. So whether you're mother, sister, etc., the exercise of really stringing out feelings from facts has helped me, and has really put back the confidence into me. And when I do have moments of weakness where I'm not working at my optimum, and I can't always because I'm not a robot, I do give myself grace, because when I look at the facts, I know what the facts are. They don't change regardless of the weather. And in regards to the second question, I haven't looked into how imposter syndrome may affect someone who identifies as bisexual, but that is an area that I'm keen to find out more about, because that'll be interesting to see from research those feelings. I'm sure there might be research out there, but again, a lot of research might be done on a certain demographic. So yeah, I'm very careful with research, hence why I wasn't trying to bombard you with research in my slides, but just giving you pointers for you to do your own research. But yeah, I'm sure there's definitely 110% different feelings of imposter that you may be feeling that I don't necessarily resonate with, but yeah, there's a lot of research that you can find that supports you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the research, and it tends to have focused on normative samples. And so, you know, the people that exist around the fringe, if you like, are the ones that are not, their experiences are not interrogated. So you talked about Rose Lab and how this supports young people. Can you say a little bit more about that, and how young people can get in contact with you if they want to access that kind of support?
Yes, so Rosa's my little baby, which I've been nurturing, and I have to be honest that imposter syndrome has definitely eaten me up several times with Rose Lab, and it's so hard because I definitely want all my learnings and experience to go into a social enterprise for people, not necessarily only people who identify as BME, but for it to for the themes in the workshops to really resonate with BME people, but can be sort of, a lot of people can attend it regardless of what background. Sorry, can you go back to your question about Rose Lab, please?
Yeah, so it's so just to say a little bit more about it, how it works in principle, and how a young person could contact you if they were interested in being part of that.
Okay, great. So we're at the stage where we're building our website, but essentially Rose Lab is about developing clear skin, clean thoughts and confidence, the 3 C's. And again, as I said, it's the intersection between biochemistry and mental health, which is my background. And we have our Instagram page set up, we have our Twitter set up, so we have people DMing us all the time to say that they want to go on a workshop, or can I give one-to-one advice, or whatever it is. A lot of the workshops are not free, but they're subsidized for, there's a fee that can be waived off for people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. So if you do want to get in contact, please email info@roselab.org.uk, or send us a DM, direct message on Twitter or Instagram, and then we can discuss what type of support you're needing. Just to mention, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. I'm literally someone who has gone through a range of experiences who wants to put that in a workshop to actively help people who may be experiencing what I am experiencing. But if you are looking for a therapist, etc., I can direct you to places as well. But it's more about building your self-awareness, self-identity, emotional intelligence, which is extremely important in the workplace, knowing how to respond to people in the best manner, I'd say. So yeah, we help you develop that, because that's something in hindsight, when I look back, is something that I would have benefited from a workshop like that when I was at university. So I thought, why not create it myself? So yeah, please do get in touch, even if it's just to say hello, that would be great.
Right, we'll ensure that when we reply to all attendees that information is included, if that's okay with you.
That's perfect.
So a final question then from me, because I'm conscious that we're getting towards the end of our time here. You talked about the benefit of having a mentor. So was that mentor somebody that was work-based, or did you seek that mentor from an external kind of
Yeah.
environment? And is a mentor what you would advocate for everyone? And even kind of linking into that, you talked about therapy. You know, did the imposter phenomenon come up as part of the conversations you would have had with your mentor or your therapist? So it's sort of two questions. Where did you get
Yeah.
them from, and what did you
Well,
talk about?
perfect. So in terms of the mentor, there was actually a tweet that went out in light of Black Lives Matter, where there was a lady that said that I think she started an organization and she had a range of mentors and they wanted to support Black individuals. I took advantage of this, of course. And yeah, it was great. So went onto our website, there was about 15 mentors and I got to read their background and align them with my interests. And yeah, we're coming to the end of our mentorship actually. So next week. So she's been my mentor for a year, which was great. Her background, she's passionate about health and well-being, which was really important for me. She works in tech. So prior to me being in tech, I knew I wanted to go into tech a year ago. So I closely aligned that with someone who was in the field, quite senior as well. But I consciously made sure that I didn't consciously make sure, out of all the mentors, they were white. So for me, I use this to my advantage because I got to talk about my own experiences and heard her own opinion, unbiased opinion. And yeah, we spoke about imposter syndrome several times, and it was just really nice to have that ally advocate for me as well. And she was non-Black. So yeah, for me, that really, really helped me. But yeah, I am going through the phase where I do need another mentor. So I think it just never ends. And what I'm looking for in a mentor now compared to what I was looking for then has changed because I am in technology now. So yeah, it's a constant journey. So that's how I found my mentor. And we discuss imposter syndrome probably in all my meetings and to some degree. My therapist, there was a website, I can't remember the website now. Psychology Today, there we go. So the website's called Psychology Today, and there's a range of therapists on there. You can browse it by location, by price, etc., etc. And yeah, I just really liked her background and what she advocated for. She was a Black woman, a little older than me, which was great. And yeah, I really enjoyed our session. So I was speaking to her about imposter syndrome heavily, intensely. I was seeing her probably twice a week at one point for like 5 months. And then I went down to once a week for like 2 months. And then I went down to every 2 weeks. And now I haven't been in contact with her since probably 2 months ago. So yeah, definitely speak about issues in the workplace that was extremely important, identity, career plans, anything that I felt like was really like playing on my mind. And again, I go into all my therapy sessions already have pre-planned what I wanted to say. But again, it's so important that you look for a therapist who suits your style of work. So my therapist really just allowed me to speak and drew out themes from things I said, and then would actively give me homework to do at the end of it. But you might want another therapist who is really reflective and allows you to reflect. So I think you really need to have to think about who you are, your temperament. And again, it comes back to self-identity, which again, I'm helping people develop in the workshops.
Fantastic. So we've reached our time, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for so eloquently and in such an interesting way, allowing us to come on the journey of your experience with you, because that's a very personal thing, but also for giving us some take homes. And I think for me, the biggest take home is that my experience is my privilege. And that's something that I take with me wherever I go. No one can take that away from me. So thank you for reinforcing that for me, and hopefully for our audience this afternoon. So special thanks to you and to our audience for joining us. Our next event in this year-long Black History series features 2 Students' Union Vice Presidents of the University of Westminster, who will reflect on the past, while looking to the future. And that event takes place on Thursday, the 1st of July at 1 p.m. Details should be posted in the chat as I'm speaking. And if you've registered already for that, you would have received your invitation by email. So just to say that from October onwards, we will have another series of exciting events and talks and presentations, including a major launch event in October featuring an internationally known poet. And I'll say no more than that. You need to book to find out. So for more details on that and everything else that we're doing on Black History Year at Westminster, please read our blog. Again, the link for that should be in the chat, and follow us at our Twitter account. A reminder that this talk has been recorded, so you can listen and listen again. I certainly will be doing that because there's a lot to take away from this talk with Rhoda this afternoon. We'll feature this on our blog along with our past events. And if you have any comments, then you're welcome to email us at our address, which will also be popping up in the chat for you. So finally, again, thank you so much, Rhoda, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to our audience for your questions posed and for your attention this afternoon. The sun is shining. We need to kind of take our imposter phenomenon outside and give it a good tan. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic. Keep up the great work. And thank you to all the attendees who listened today on this bright sunny day. But yeah, take care. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.